It started the way most modern hauntings start, not with a scream or a shadow, but with a clip on my phone that wouldn't stop replaying itself in my head. Please mind the gap between the train and the platform edge. A beat of ordinary station noise, shoes, a cough, the soft metallic sigh of doors. Then the voice again, calm as always, the kind of calm that makes London feel like London. We are sorry to announce a delay due to a person on the track. The clip was 11 seconds long. The caption above it was longer. Piccadilly Line just predicted the future. Posted by a teenager with a username full of underscores, reposted by a commuter meme page, then by a local journalist, then by people who believed in ghosts and people who didn't but liked the idea. The reason it went viral was the timing. The clip had a timestamp, some overlaid phone clock showing 1842. And then, a few minutes later, another video surfaced. The same platform, the same station, a crowd pressed together, staff in high-vis vests moving fast, someone shouting, "Stand back, please." The departure boards freezing into apology mode. Delay due to a person on the track. At 1848, the official service account posted it. People did the maths like it was a magic trick. 6 minutes. In a city that couldn't predict rain, a tube announcement had predicted a tragedy. I watched it once, twice, 10 times, as if repetition would make it normal. It didn't, because I recognized the voice, not just as a Londoner, not just as someone who'd ridden the Piccadilly Line since childhood, but as someone who worked with sound for a living. The rhythm was wrong. The voice was right, the phrasing was right, the warmthless kindness, the flat, even tone designed not to startle anyone. But the breath between sentences had been cut too clean. Someone had edited it. And if someone had edited it, then someone had planned it. I was standing in my kitchen, the window black with December evening, kettle clicking off behind me, when the clip looped again and I realized my hands were shaking. The last time I'd shaken like that was years ago, after a different announcement, on a different line, spoken with the same calm authority. Due to a person under a train. I hadn't seen anything then. You never see anything. London is very good at making sure you never see anything. You just hear the words and you carry them home. Now the words had come early, premature, like a throat clearing before the speech. I looked at the comments under the viral post. Fake. It's pre-recorded, obviously. No, it's live. I was there. Government psyop. Creepy. Someone wrote, "They're testing a murder script." I laughed once sharply because it was absurd, and then the laughter died because it wasn't absurd at all. I replayed the clip one more time and listened for something most people never listen for, the faint bed of silence behind a recording, the hum of the room it was recorded in, the texture of air. There wasn't any. It was too perfect. It sounded like it had come from nowhere. My phone buzzed, a message from my friend Imani. "You've seen it, right? People are losing their minds. You work in audio. Tell me it's fake." I stared at the screen, and for a moment I imagined answering the easiest thing. "It's fake, don't worry." Instead, I typed the truth. "It's edited." That doesn't mean the event was, but the announcement, someone stitched it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Why would anyone do that? The kettle clicked again as it cooled, like something small and mechanical settling into place. In my head, the voice repeated itself, polite as ever. "We are sorry to announce." And beneath that politeness, the shape of intention began to form, because there was only one reason to predict a delay due to a person on the track, to make sure there would be one. The next morning, London wore frost like a Finn apology. The pavement glittered, the air tasted of metal. I took the Piccadilly Line not because I needed to, but because I couldn't not. If you want to understand a sound, you go to where it lives. The station was Leicester Square, according to the clip's caption. That made sense. Dense, busy, always full of tourists and tired workers. The kind of place where people could vanish into a crowd without anyone noticing. I stood on the platform and let the normal announcements wash over me. Mind the gap. Keep your personal belongings with you at all times. If you see something that doesn't look right, a train arrived, wind rushing ahead of it, and for a second the tunnel's breath felt like the intake before a confession. Nothing happened. I watched faces instead, people in scarves, eyes down, screens glowing, a man with a newspaper folded like a shield, a woman with lipstick the colour of a bus. Everyone was waiting for something, always. That's what the tube teaches you, waiting, for doors to open, for trains to move, for the person in front of you to step aside. I wasn't waiting for a train. I was waiting for the moment sound became prophecy. I tried to imagine what it would feel like if the announcement came. We are sorry to announce a delay due to a person on the track. Would I freeze? Would anyone? Or would we all do what London always does, shift our weight, sigh, open our phones, accept the delay like weather? A couple beside me were talking about the clip. I heard it predicted it, the woman said, like before it happened. Her friend scoffed. It's all scheduled. They say delays all the time. One of them was bound to match. But the timestamp. Anyone can add a timestamp. I wanted to interrupt, to tell them about the clean cut in the breath, about the lack of room tone, about the way the phrase had a tiny stutter that sounded like a splice. I didn't. People don't like it when you make their mysteries smaller. Instead, I took out my own phone, not to watch the viral clip, but to record. I hit record and held it down by my thigh as casually as I could, like I was texting. I captured the platform's soundscape, shoes, announcements, train wind, distant laughter, and then, faintly, something else, a whisper of music, not from a busker, not from someone's headphones. It was too thin for that, too located. It drifted from a corner near a service door, a melody that didn't belong, 3 notes repeating like a cue. I walked toward it slowly, pretending to look at the map. The service door was painted the same color as the wall, as if the station wanted to forget it existed. A small sign above it read, "Staff only." The music stopped the moment I was close enough to touch the door. There was only silence. Then, through the thin seam of the door, a sound like a voice clearing its throat. I stepped back, heart thudding. A member of staff emerged from the door at that exact moment. A man in a high-vis jacket, face tired, eyes glazed the way mine felt. He looked at me too long, as if deciding whether I belonged. "Can I help you?" he said. His tone was polite, too polite. "No," I said quickly. "Sorry, I thought I heard—" "People hear things," he said, cutting me off gently, as if delivering a memorised line. "It's a noisy place." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. He walked away. His radio crackled. I stood there staring at the door, and when I played back my recording later, I expected to hear the music again. But on the audio file there was nothing, just platform noise, as if the melody had been for my ears only, or as if the phone microphone had filtered it out the way it filtered out certain frequencies, the way it filtered out certain things you weren't supposed to capture.
At home that evening, I sent the original viral clip to a friend who did forensic audio for court cases. Her name was Tessa. She was the sort of person who could hear lies. She replied 2 hours later. It's been edited, multiple cuts. Also, there's a second voice under it, very low, like a guide track. You won't like what it says. I stared at her message until the words blurred. I typed, "What does it say?" 3 dots. Then, it's counting, not numbers, stations. I felt cold inside my ribs, a deeper cold than the frost outside. A guide track, like a script. Someone had been rehearsing the announcement, and beneath the public voice of London, something private had been whispering directions. On Tuesday, I took the clip to my workplace, because if you can't sleep, you might as well professionalise your paranoia. I worked at a small production studio near Soho, the kind of place where you could record a podcast in the morning and a radio advert in the afternoon, where everything smelled faintly of coffee and old foam panels. We did voice work, sound design, mixing, the invisible architecture of other people's stories. My boss, Richard, looked at me over his glasses as I set my laptop down. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. "Worse," I said, "I've heard one." I played the clip through the studio monitors. In here, the sound became enormous. The announcement voice filled the room like a cathedral. When it finished, Richard frowned. "People have been sending me this," he said, "asking if it's a prank." "It's not," I said. "It's edited. There's a guide track under it." Imani leaned in from the doorway holding a tea. "A guide track? Like music?" "Like someone quietly saying where to cut," I said, "or what to say next." We played it again, this time looking at the waveform, peaks and valleys, clean slices, hard edges where there should have been breath. Tessa's message echoed in my head. Stations. Richard scrubbed through the audio, isolating frequencies, the way you peel layers from a painting. And there it was, barely audible, but unmistakable once you knew it was there. A whisper. Not the announcement voice, lower, rougher. "Leicester Square, Piccadilly, next, next." My skin prickled. Imani's key trembled slightly in her hand. Richard stopped the audio and looked at me. "This is someone coaching," he said quietly, "or someone tracking a timeline." "Testing," I said, because I couldn't stop thinking of the comment, "testing a murder script." Richard exhaled. "That's a hell of a leap." "Is it?" I said. Imani swallowed. "What if it's just some idiot making a creepy edit?" "Then how did it match the real delay?" I said. Richard's eyes shifted, and I knew what he was thinking. Probability, coincidence, the comfort of skepticism. Then he tapped the desk. "The timestamp," he said. "That's the key. If the timestamp is fake, the whole thing collapses." "Unless the clip came from an internal system," I said, "something timestamped automatically." Richard stared. "You mean from TFL?" I didn't answer, because saying it out loud made it feel like I'd stepped onto a platform that wasn't there. Imani set her tea down. "How do you get an internal recording of a platform announcement?" "Someone who works there," I said, "or someone who used to, or someone who knows how to—" Richard lifted a hand. "Don't say it. I don't want that in my studio." He was right to stop me. I wasn't interested in how. I was interested in why. I watched the waveform again and noticed something else, a tiny signature in the noise floor, a repeating pattern, like a faint watermark. I zoomed in. Richard leaned closer. "That's—" he began. "Not room tone," I said. It's a bed, like a tonal marker. Someone put it there. Imani frowned. Why would you put a marker in a clip? So you can prove it's yours, I said. A quiet moment passed. In that moment, I could feel a new shape forming behind my thoughts. Not a prankster, not a ghost, but a person who wanted credit. A person who wanted to be known. Richard sat back. "This is not our problem," he said gently. It was the kind of sentence adults say when they're trying to keep the world orderly, but I'd heard the whisper under the announcement. Leicester Square. Next. Next. A route. A plan. I looked at Richard. Can you isolate the whisper clearly? He hesitated. Why? Because I want to know where it goes, I said. Imani's eyes widened. You're going to follow it? I smiled without humor. Someone already is. Richard sighed, defeated by the fact that I was already halfway gone. He rendered the whisper track as its own file, cleaned it as best he could, and sent it to me with a warning in the email subject line. Don't be stupid. On the train home, headphones in, I listened to the whisper on loop. It wasn't just stations, it was timing cues. Hold, hold, now. A shiver moved through me, because that wasn't a recording of the tube. That was a recording of someone staging a moment. That night, the service updates announced a minor disruption on the Piccadilly Line, signal failure, earlier delays, nothing about a person on the track. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt the way you feel when someone cancels plans at the last minute. Not safe, just postponed.
By Wednesday, the story had mutated. Online, people were calling it the Piccadilly Prophecy. There were reaction videos, Tube Psychic confirmed headlines. Someone sold a T-shirt. And then, as if London had decided to participate in its own myth, another clip appeared. Different station, same line. Covent Garden. Same calm voice. We are sorry to announce a delay due to a person on the track. This time, the timestamp read 09:13. At 9:20, service was suspended between King's Cross, St Pancras and Hammersmith. The comment sections exploded. And when I downloaded the clip and ran it through the same analysis, the same things appeared. The clean cuts, the faint watermark, the whisper underneath. Different words, but the same private guidance. Covent Garden, next, hold, now. My mouth tasted of pennies. This wasn't coincidence, this wasn't luck, this was pattern. And patterns are how you write scripts. I went back to Leicester Square at lunchtime, not to wait, but to watch. There's a way London moves when something is about to happen. You see it in the tiny tightening of shoulders, in people glancing up as if the ceiling might drop. But the platform looked normal, which was the most unsettling part. Normality was the camouflage. I stood near the same service door as before. I watched staff. I listened. The music returned. 3 notes, thin as wire. This time I didn't approach the door. I turned my head slightly and looked at the CCTV dome above the platform. Its black eye stared back. In the corner of my vision, a man stepped out of the crowd. He looked like a commuter, dark coat, gloves, backpack. Nothing about him screamed danger. That's the trick. Danger in London wears normal clothes. He didn't stand at the edge like someone desperate. He stood 2 steps back like someone waiting for someone else. He checked his phone once, then looked up at the departure board, then down again.
He was sinking. I watched him for a full minute, and then his gaze lifted, not to the tunnel, but to the ceiling speaker, as if he was listening for a cue. The three-note melody stopped. The platform's general noise softened like a room holding its breath. Then the announcement voice came, almost tender. "We are sorry to announce a delay due to a person on the track." A ripple moved through the crowd, sighs, murmurs, the familiar annoyance. And that's when the man stepped forward, not toward the track, but toward a woman beside him. He moved close enough that his shoulder brushed hers, too close, intentionally close. His hand slipped low, quick, toward a coat pocket. She flinched. I saw it, the real jerk of discomfort, the way she turned. He smiled at her as if apologising, then stepped away. My stomach dropped. Pickpocket, or something else. The woman checked her pocket, confused. She pulled out her phone, then looked at it as if it had betrayed her. The man in the backpack drifted into the crowd, already melting. I pushed forward instinctively, but London crowds are thick and polite in a way that becomes a wall. By the time I reached the space where he'd been, he was gone. The platform remained in delay mode. Staff walked briskly, radios crackling. Someone made an announcement about an earlier incident, about waiting. The words "person on the track" hung there like a smell. I watched the woman. She moved away from the edge, face pale, hands trembling. She wasn't grieving, not yet. She was frightened. And I understood then the announcement wasn't only predicting an event, it was controlling behaviour. When you tell people there's a person on the track, you shift the crowd, you create impatience, distraction, gaps in attention. You make people less careful, you make the platform into a stage. I left the station shaking, my recording running in my pocket. Outside, the winter light was thin, the city looked indifferent. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop listening to things under the announcements. You're not supposed to hear the script." For a moment, I stood still on the pavement while people flowed around me like water around a stone. I typed back without thinking. "Who are you?" The reply came instantly. "Someone who doesn't want you to be the next delay." I didn't go home. Going home felt like walking into a room where someone might already be waiting. Instead, I went to the only place in London where a sound can be both remembered and proven, the archive. The British Library's reading rooms had a hush that felt like the city holding its own secrets. I requested access to public recordings of London transport announcements, old radio broadcasts, anything that might explain the voice's exact cadence. While I waited, I listened again to the whisper track Richard had extracted. "Hold. Now. Move." It was a director's voice, someone staging an invisible play with real bodies. A staff member brought me a set of headphones and a terminal. I typed in variations, Piccadilly Line announcements, station PA systems, archival voice recordings, and then I found something that made my skin go cold. A training file. Not public, not widely known, but indexed in a way only an archivist would love. A sample set of announcement phrases used for staff education, recorded decades ago. I clicked play. The same calm voice filled my ears, but younger, slightly brighter, like a photograph before it fades. I rewound, listened again. In the viral clip, the voice had sounded contemporary, clean, crisp, modern compression. But here, in the archive, it carried the faint hiss of older recording, which meant one thing. The viral voice wasn't live, it was sampled. Someone was using an older voice file, an original library, to build new announcements. A phrase bank, a script kit. I printed out the metadata and stared at the name attached to the training file. Not the speaker's name, those were often anonymous. The engineer, a person credited for compiling and cataloguing the announcement library. I copied the name into my notes and left the library with the uneasy certainty that I'd just found the spine of the thing. Outside, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You found the library. Good. Now stop.
My throat tightened. The fact that they knew where I was or what I'd done felt like a hand closing around the back of my neck. I typed back slowly. "You're watching me." Their reply took longer this time. "No, I'm listening." I looked up at the street, at the cameras, at the faces. For the first time, the whole city sounded loud, as if every footstep might be a signal. And then, in the noise of London, I heard it again. 3 notes. Not from a station this time, from somewhere close, from someone's pocket. A ringtone, a cue. I turned. A man stood across the road, half hidden behind a bus stop advertisement, looking at his phone like he was waiting for something to begin. He looked up. Our eyes met. He smiled faintly, like we were sharing a joke. Then he walked away, and the ringtone, those 3 notes, faded into the crowd.
That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling and imagined it as a speaker grill. In the early hours, I listened to every new upload about the predictive announcements. There were compilations now, people stitching together clips like ghost hunters. And something struck me. The clips always started at the same point, right before the key phrase. No one ever posted the minutes before. No one ever posted the full announcement sequence. It was always the prophecy itself, isolated, dramatic, shareable. It felt curated, like someone wanted the internet to focus on the magic trick and miss the hands doing it. At 02:18, I opened the whisper track again and listened harder than I had before, as if force could reveal hidden meaning. Beneath the whisper, even fainter, there was another layer, almost inaudible, more like a rhythm than speech, a tapping, a metronome. My fingers hovered over my keyboard as I ran the audio through a spectral analyzer. Peaks formed a pattern, not random, intentional, like code. I wasn't a hacker, I wasn't a cryptographer, but I was a sound person, and sound is just information that thinks it can hide. I converted the tapping to a simple visual representation, dots and dashes. I felt ridiculous, like a Victorian deciphering Morse in a séance. Then the letters appeared. Not a full message, just a repeating phrase. Read the last word. Read the last word. My stomach lurched. The last word. Of what? I pulled up transcripts of the announcement phrases people were quoting online. I wrote them down in order. Please mind the gap between the train and the platform edge. We are sorry to announce a delay due to a person on the track. Please listen for further announcements. Last words. Edge. Track. Announcements. I did it again with the second viral clip. Edge. Track. Please. It didn't make sense. Then I realized I was looking at it wrong. Not the last word of each sentence, the last word of each clip's title, people naming the uploads.
The internet doing the work for the scriptwriter because humans can't resist leaving breadcrumbs. I started listing the viral uploads titles, the ones that were trending, the ones that came from different accounts but looked suspiciously similar in formatting. Tube predicted it again, Covent Garden. Piccadilly announcement before incident. This is getting scary, King's Cross. Not a coincidence, watch this. It happened right after, listen. Last words. Covent Garden. Incident. King's Cross. This. Listen. It was messy, not a message, unless only certain uploads were meant to be read, unless someone was selecting them like chapters. I looked at the accounts posting the cleanest clips. Many were new, few followers, viral anyway. I clicked through one of them and felt my mouth go dry. Their username was a string of letters and numbers, but the profile picture was a simple icon, a page, a script page, and their bio said, "We write what happens next." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You're doing well. You're a good audience." I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Audience. That was what I'd been from the start. Not investigator, not hero. Viewer, listener. And the thought that someone had built this for attention, for applause, made something in me twist with disgust. Because that meant the next delay wouldn't just happen, it would be performed. On Friday, I took the day off work and rode the Piccadilly Line end to end, the way people do when they want to remember they are still in control of their own movement. I started at Cock Foster's, where the line begins like a sentence. I sat near the doors and watched people get on and off, each stop a punctuation mark. Every station has its own sound, the hollow echo of one, the bright chatter of another, the damp hush of a deep tunnel. I listened for the 3-note cue. It came at South Kensington, faint and quick. My pulse jumped. I didn't move. I watched. Across from me sat a man with headphones. Nothing unusual. Everyone has headphones now. The city's sealed in private audio. But his headphones weren't plugged into anything. No phone, no music player. He was listening to silence, or pretending to. When the train slowed, he lifted his gaze to the carriage speaker. And then a voice, different from the platform voice, came through, normal and cheerful. "This train terminates at..." The man's eyes narrowed, displeased, as if the announcement had missed its mark. He stood abruptly and left the train at the last second, doors beeping behind him. I followed, because the alternative was sitting still and waiting to be written. South Kensington platform was crowded, museums nearby, tourists, school groups. The man walked fast, weaving through people with the ease of someone who'd practiced. He stopped near a pillar, pulled out his phone, and pressed play on something. He held the phone close to his ear, listening. Then he looked up at the ceiling speakers like he expected them to answer. He wasn't broadcasting. He was checking a cue. I moved closer, pretending to check my own phone, and as I passed behind him, I caught a glimpse of his screen. It wasn't a music app. It was a waveform. Audio editing. He looked up suddenly, as if he'd sensed my presence, and for a split second his eyes met mine. He didn't look surprised. He looked amused. He turned and walked toward the exit. I followed at a distance, my heart thudding. Outside the station, he disappeared into the museum crowds like he'd never existed. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "Stop following my editor. He's bad at acting." My blood went cold. My editor. As if the person texting me believed this was a production. As if London was their set and I was ruining the shot. I typed back, "If this is a script, write this. I'm not scared of you." The reply was immediate. "Yes, you are. That's why it's good." I stood on the pavement by the station entrance, cars rushing past, tourists laughing, the world normal and bright, and I realized something that made me dizzy. This wasn't one person, this was a team, a writer, an editor, possibly an insider, a small production crew using the tube as their stage, and in the middle of it, real people, real risk being treated as background extras. I went back underground because the only way to stop a script is to get ahead of it, and scripts always have a next scene.
The next scene arrived on a Sunday, because Sundays are when London pretends to rest. Fewer trains, fewer commuters, more space for something to go wrong. A new clip dropped online at 16:02. Piccadilly Line, Green Park Station. The calm voice. We are sorry to announce a delay due to a person on the track. Timestamp 15:54. 8 minutes. Longer than before. The comments erupted, it's getting earlier, as if the widening gap was part of the fun. I didn't watch the reaction videos. I put on my coat and went to Green Park. The station smelled like wet wool and cold stone. On the platform, people stood with shopping bags, Sunday coats, bored faces. Nothing dramatic, nothing staged. And yet my skin felt too tight, like I was wearing someone else's life. I stood near the middle of the platform, far from the edge, and watched the doors along the wall. Maintenance, staff, emergency. The 3-note cue came, soft as breath. I didn't look toward the sound. I looked for who reacted to it. A woman in a beige coat flinched, tiny, involuntary. A man with a backpack lifted his head. A teenager laughed, nervous. They weren't in on it, they were just sensitive to the atmosphere, like animals before a storm. Then I saw him, the man with the waveform app, standing near a pillar, phone in hand, eyes fixed on the speaker. He was waiting for something to happen, not predicting, not fearing, waiting. I moved closer, keeping my face neutral. The platform announcement voice began, not the person on the track one, but a standard message about service. The man's frowned and glanced down at his phone. His thumb moved like he was scrubbing audio. Then, through the speakers, the famous phrase began. We are sorry to announce. The man's posture changed, subtle and satisfied. My stomach turned. I stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the detergent on his coat, and I spoke quietly. Who's your writer? His eyes snapped to mine. For a second he looked genuinely startled, as if the script had never included someone talking back. Then his expression smoothed into something rehearsed. I don't know what you mean, he said too quickly. You're waiting for it. You're sinking to it. You're not a witness. You're crew. His jaw tightened. Move, he said softly. Behind us, the crowd shifted, irritated by the delay announcement. A ripple of movement, a slow push. The platform edge became closer for some people, not because they chose it, but because the crowd made it so. And in that moment, I understood the murder script. It didn't need a knife. It needed timing, pressure, distraction. It needed a crowd and a small nudge and an announcement that turned everyone's attention upward. The editor's eyes flicked past me toward a spot 2 meters away where a man in a dark coat stood unusually still, hands in pockets, gaze lowered. Not waiting for a train, waiting for a person. I stepped sideways abruptly, putting myself between the still man and the nearest edge of crowd. The editor's eyes widened. You don't get it, he hissed. This isn't yours. It's not yours either, I said. The still man lifted his head, and for the first time I saw his face properly. It was ordinary, mid-30s, clean-shaven, the kind of face you'd forget the moment you looked away, except his eyes. His eyes were bright with the hunger of someone about to watch something unfold exactly as planned. He looked at me like I was a problem. Then, without warning, the still man moved, one swift step toward the crowd, a shoulder angling, seeking contact. I reacted before thinking. I grabbed his sleeve. He jerked, surprised, and in that split second his body weight shifted away from the edge. He glared at me. His voice was calm. "Don't touch me." "I'm sorry," I said, loud enough that people nearby looked. "You dropped something." I bent as if picking up an imaginary item, perform for them, use London's politeness against him. The still man's eyes darted around, calculating. Attention was poison for this kind of act. He stepped back, disengaging, and melted into the crowd with sudden speed. The editor stared after him, breathing hard, as if he'd lost a cue. Then he looked at me with something like hatred. "You've just ruined a take," he said. And then he ran, up the stairs, into the station, gone. I stood there trembling, surrounded by annoyed Sunday shoppers, while the calm voice repeated apologies into the air. No one screamed. No one knew. The platform returned to normal. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking because I could still feel the weight of that man's sleeve under my fingers, and the certainty that if I hadn't grabbed him, someone else might have fallen or been pushed, and the internet would have called it a prophecy again.
Back home, I laid everything out like evidence. Clips, timestamps, the whisper track, the 3-note cue. I felt like a detective in a film, except the villain was the city itself. I listened to the unknown number's messages again, reading them like dialogue. Stop listening. You're not supposed to hear the script. Stop following my editor. My editor? The person texting me wasn't just watching, they were directing. They were close enough to know roles, and they had a possessive streak. I wrote back, "You almost got someone killed at Green Park." The reply came after a long pause. "Almost isn't a show." My stomach clenched. "So you want it to happen?" A beat. "I want it to land." Land. Like a joke. Like a line in theatre. Like applause. I realised then that the killer, if killer was even the right word, wasn't motivated by money or revenge. They were motivated by narrative satisfaction. They wanted an ending that felt inevitable. I opened the forum linked in the script page account's bio. It was private, but the login page had a title, The Roster. Underneath, auditions closed. I tried a password that felt stupidly obvious, Piccadilly. It rejected it. I tried Mind the Gap. Rejected. Then I tried something Tessa had once told me about audio engineers. They love metadata. They love file names. I typed the engineer's surname from the British Library training file. The site opened. A list appeared. Threads, dates, stations, times, like a production schedule. My mouth went dry. One thread was pinned at the top. Episode 6, the real one. Under it, a single line. Piccadilly Line, King's Cross, St Pancras, 1842. The same time as the very first viral clip. This wasn't random. This wasn't escalating organically. It had seasons, episodes. And now I was looking at their calendar. Another thread beneath it. Casting. Person on the track. Replies were cruel jokes. People talking about volunteers and method acting, as if the subject wasn't human. But then I saw something worse. A reply from a user tagged writer. "No volunteers. We need authenticity. We'll source it the old way." I sat back, dizzy. The old way. I thought of the pickpocketing moment at Leicester Square. Distraction, theft. Maybe they weren't just staging pushes. Maybe they were engineering vulnerability, stealing a phone, a wallet, a distraction that led someone somewhere at the wrong moment. I scrolled further, heart pounding, and found a private message in my inbox. No sender name, just a blank icon. A file attached.
script_rev3.wave. I hesitated, then clicked. It opened as audio. I pressed play. At first, silence, then a whisper, close, intimate, as if someone was leaning into my ear. "This is the part where you try to stop it," the voice said. It wasn't the editor, it wasn't the platform voice, it was the writer. And the writer sounded like someone smiling. "You're doing wonderfully," the writer whispered. "You've given the audience hope. Now we can take it away." I ripped my headphones off, breathing hard, as if sound could physically harm me. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. King's Cross. "You'll be there." I stared at the message, and for the first time in days, I felt something sharper than fear. Anger. Because they weren't just predicting, they weren't just staging, they were recruiting me into their ending. And I knew then what I had to do. If they wanted an audience, I would give them one, but not the kind they wanted.
On Monday evening, I went to King's Cross St Pancras early, not as a commuter, but as someone arriving for a performance she intended to ruin. The station was bright and busy, crowds flowing like a river under fluorescent lights. It smelled of coffee and cold air, of luggage wheels and damp wool. I moved through the corridors and down toward the Piccadilly Line platforms, my phone in my pocket recording continuously, my heart beating too hard. 1821, 1829, 1837. I stood in a spot where I could see both ends of the platform. I watched faces, I watched staff, I watched the service doors. I waited for the 3-note cue. It came at 1840, faint like a bird call. My muscles tightened. 2 meters away, the editor stood near a pillar, phone in hand. He didn't look at me, he looked at the speaker. Across the platform, the still man from Green Park leaned against the wall, hands in pockets, gaze lowered. And then, near the far end, someone else, a figure in a high-vis jacket, stood unusually still, as if trying too hard to look like staff. I understood suddenly, the insider, the one who could make announcements appear at precise moments, the one who could shift crowds with a sentence. I stepped forward and walked directly to the high-vis figure. Up close, he smelled wrong, cheap aftershave, not the usual station grime. His badge lanyard was turned inward, name hidden. I smiled at him like a lost tourist. "Excuse me," I said, loudly, friendly. "Is there a delay due to a person on the track?" His eyes flicked up, startled. For a split second, the actor fell out of character. Then he recovered. "Please stand back from the platform edge," he said, voice flat. Not a staff script, not the exact phrasing, a bad improv. I lifted my phone, still smiling. "Can you say your name? I'm doing a short video about station staff. It's for a community project." He stiffened. The editor's head snapped toward us. The still man's gaze lifted. The crew sensed disruption the way animals sense fire. "Don't film," the high-vis man said, stepping closer. I took one step back, toward the center of the platform, away from the edge. I wanted them to follow me away from danger. People nearby glanced over, curious. Attention, again, was poison. The high-vis man hesitated, calculating whether he could risk making a scene. Behind him, the calm platform announcement voice began. "We are sorry to announce a delay." It came too early, a cue triggered out of frustration, panic. The crowd reacted with the usual sighs, but now they were also looking at us, their annoyance sharpened into curiosity. I raised my voice. "Someone's pretending to be staff," I said, clear and loud. "Please keep back." The sentence cut through the platform like a thrown glass. The high-vis man's face tightened. The editor started moving toward me fast. The still man pushed off the wall, body angling into the crowd like a shark turning. And then the writer arrived. Not physically, at least not visibly. The speakers shifted tone, as if someone had taken control of the PA. A different voice came through, not the standard calm one. This voice was softer, closer, almost intimate. "Ladies and gentlemen," it said, "thank you for joining us." For a heartbeat, the platform went quiet in the way it does when something truly wrong enters the air. People looked up. The high-vis man froze. The editor's face drained of colour, because that wasn't an official announcement. That was a voice hijacking the atmosphere. And then the voice added, almost cheerfully, "We're sorry to announce a delay due to a person." It paused, as if waiting for laughter. The crowd didn't laugh. The pause stretched. The writer's voice sighed through the speakers, irritated. "You've ruined the timing," it said softly. "That's not fair." A woman near me whispered, "What is this?" Someone started filming. A security guard at the far end lifted his radio, confused. The high-vis man bolted suddenly, shoving through the crowd. The editor followed, trying to catch him, panic in his movements. The still man hesitated. His plan depended on silence and distraction, not dozens of phones pointed like eyes. He stepped back, melting away. I ran, not after them, but toward the nearest staff member in real TFL uniform, breath sharp in my throat. There's someone impersonating staff and someone's messing with the announcements. Please. The staff member stared at me, then at the crowd, then at the speakers, as the writer's voice crackled again, angry now. This was supposed to be beautiful. The staff member's expression hardened into professional alarm. He spoke into his radio quickly, words clipped. And then alarms began. Not fire alarms, but the subtle shift of a station snapping into procedure. Staff moved, doors were watched, people were instructed. The platform became controlled. The script lost its stage. As the crowd was guided back and the trains were held, I felt my knees threaten to give. I'd stopped it, or I'd delayed it, and I knew, deep down, that a writer doesn't forgive a spoiled ending. I thought it was over when I left the station. I thought, foolishly, that disruption was enough. London at night was wet with reflected light. Buses hissed by. The city looked normal again, like it always does after swallowing something awful. My phone buzzed once more. Unknown number. Good performance, but you missed the real scene. My stomach dropped. I turned in place, scanning the street. People moved, taxi lights, a couple laughing. Then another message. You think the announcements are the script. The script is you. My mouth went dry. My footsteps quickened, not toward home, but toward the brightest place, a late-night cafe across from the station entrance, where glass walls meant visibility. I sat near the window, heart pounding, and tried to breathe. I opened the forum again on my phone. A new post had appeared. Episode 6 cancelled. Audience interference. Under it, the writer account had posted Plan B, live rewrite. My hands went cold. Live rewrite meant improvisation, unpredictability, danger. Then a private message appeared in my inbox. A single line. Check your pocket. My breath stopped. Slowly, carefully, I reached into my coat pocket. My fingers touched something small and plastic. Not my keys. A card. I pulled it out. A TFL staff access card.
the kind clipped to lanyards, blank-faced, anonymous, not mine. I stared at it as if it might bite. My mind replayed the moment at Leicester Square, the man brushing close, hand moving toward a pocket. The pickpocket. They hadn't stolen from someone else, they'd planted something on me. A prop, evidence, a way to cast me. My phone buzzed again. Congratulations, you're the insider now.
I swallowed hard. My body felt too loud, like a microphone feeding back. Outside, 2 police officers walked past the cafe, chatting casually. I wanted to run out and wave them down, spill everything, pour the whole ugly truth into the street. But I imagined how it would sound. A forum, a writer, a script, a voice under the announcements. It would sound like a story. And that was the worst part, because it was. The writer had designed it so that even if I told the truth, people would hear it as entertainment. My fingers tightened around the access card until the edges hurt. Then, in the reflection of the cafe window, I saw someone watching me from across the street. Not the editor, not the still man, someone older, a man with a neat coat, scarf tucked properly, standing as if waiting for a bus. His face was calm, almost kind. He lifted his hand slightly, a small wave, as if we were acquaintances. Then he tapped his ear. I froze. He was signalling, I'm listening. The writer. He smiled, and in that smile I saw the satisfaction of someone who'd managed to get their story into the real world. He turned and walked away into the crowd, disappearing without haste. My phone buzzed one last time. Final note. The best stories end with a new voice. I stared at the words until they blurred. Outside, a train rumbled underground, unseen, and somewhere beneath the city, a calm voice practiced an apology.
In the weeks that followed, the viral clips stopped. People got bored, they always do. London moved on to the next scandal, the next weather, the next distraction. Officially, the predictive announcement was dismissed as misinformation. Timestamps were called unreliable. A few staff members were reprimanded for unauthorized audio playback, a phrase so bland it could hide anything. The forum vanished. The roster page returned a simple error. Richard told me to stop. Tessa told me to go to the police. Imani told me she'd never ride the Piccadilly Line again without headphones. I tried to do the normal things: work, sleep, shop, laugh. But once you've heard the city whispering under its own announcements, you can't unhear it. Sometimes when I stood on a platform and the usual voice told me to mind the gap, I heard something else beneath it. So faint I couldn't prove it, so intimate it felt like it was meant for me alone. A breath, a tiny pause, a suggestion of a cue, and every time my skin would tighten because I couldn't tell if I was hearing a real layer or if my brain was adding one, the way trauma writes its own soundtracks. One evening, late, my phone buzzed with an email from an unfamiliar address. No subject line, just an attachment. An audio file. I stared at it for a long time before I clicked. When I finally pressed play, the sound that filled my headphones wasn't a tube announcement. It was my own voice, from a recording I'd made at King's Cross. My warning, loud and clear. Someone's pretending to be staff. Then, underneath my voice, a whisper I hadn't noticed at the time. Soft, satisfied. Perfect, it said. That's the line. I sat very still, the room around me quiet. The writer hadn't just been staging delays, they'd been capturing performances, collecting voices, turning real fear into clean, shareable narrative. My phone buzzed with a message from a number I still hadn't managed to trace. We didn't kill anyone. You didn't save anyone, but you sounded amazing. I felt sick. Then another message. New project, new line, new voice. I stared at the screen, my reflection ghosted in it. Outside my window, London hummed. Traffic, distant sirens, the low breath of the city. In that hum, I heard 3 notes. Not loud, not clear, just enough. A cue. I closed my eyes and imagined the writer somewhere, listening to the city like a mixing desk, waiting for the next moment to cut, to shape, to land. And I realised with a cold clarity that the scariest thing wasn't that the tube could predict a tragedy. It was that someone had learned how easily London would accept a script, as long as the voice stayed calm, and the apology sounded official, and the crowd kept moving forward. I opened a new audio project on my laptop. I labelled it with a name that felt like a promise. The Piccadilly Line Recording, Countercat. Then I hit record. If they wanted a new voice, I would give them one. Not as an audience member, not as a character, but as someone who had learned the only way to survive a story written for you was to start writing back.